Welcome to this Google Earth webinar. This is the first webinar in a two-part series. So part one is going to be going through just the basic Google Earth Web, and the Google Earth phone app functions. So if you are aware of all of these features, you can skip straight to part two, which is then going to be looking at some of the spatial files which Farmacist has provided to growers as part of the P2D project. So Precision to Decision is funded by the partnership between the Australian Government's Reef Trust, the Great Barrier Reef Foundation and Farmacist. So the project is focused on supporting you to gain a better understanding of your farm to maximise efficiency and profitability through precision ag data layers, such as EM mapping, satellite imagery, georeference soil samples and yield maps. To install Google Earth, click on the Google Earth Pro Setup application file that's on your USB. Then click Yes. Click Close and then navigate to the Start menu and search for Google Earth. You can see that it pops up here, and from there you can click Open. This brings you to the view of the globe. You can navigate this by clicking and dragging with the mouse and using your scroll button on your mouse to zoom in and zoom back out. To search for a location, there's a search bar up the top left-hand corner. You can type in a city name or a town name, a street name, and click search, and it will zoom into the city centre. If you've got a latitude and longitude of a known location, you can also type that in to be able to search, as well as any features. For example, the aerodrome. The first thing to do is have a look at some of the tools that are present across the toolbar, and also down on the right-hand side, and the layers panels that's on the left-hand side. So if we scroll into a farm using our scroll panel on our mouse, this is the Farmacist farm here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is add a place mark. So using this little tool here, we can click on it and it brings up a place mark, which we can then click and drag to exactly where we want to go. Put it there. From there, we can give it a name. We can change the icon. We can change the color. And we can change the size. We can add a description. We can add a label. And we can change the label size as well. The next tool is adding a polygon. So if we click on that, we then end up with this little crosshairs button on the mouse. And what I'm going to do is click along my paddock to make a polygon. So we're going to give this the name. So I'm going to call this block 1. We can add description, which could be anything about the paddock. We can add a colour, give it a yellow colour. I'm going to change the opacity. And I'm just going to make that filled. We can change the line colour on the outside as well. There's lots of different options in here. Then we've got measurements, so we can get a perimeter measurement in meters and our area in hectares. Once I click OK, that's going to save. It's going to turn up over here. The next tool is a path. So I'm going to click that. And then from there, if I would like to know how long the block is, I can click at my start point and my finish point, and then I can go to measurements and I can see that it's 460 meters. Or I can change that into any different units that I want. I can change the color of the line. And I can change the width of the line as well. From here on my path, I can then click on it, right click, and show elevation profile. Now this brings up a very raw elevation profile along my line. And as I move my mouse along the elevation profile, the little arrow on the line moves along in conjunction with it. What you can see is that as I move along the line, the elevation of the paddock changes slightly, and the grade also changes. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that this data is not to be used for land levelling, and it's not a replacement for collecting elevation data from the paddock. What it would be good for is if you were to be more so looking at the natural landscape. For example, if we go across to Mount Inkerman and click Add Path, and we draw a path across Mount Inkerman and show the elevation profile of that, it gives a much greater example of how this tool is meant to be used. So it does exist, and it may be useful in picking up things like drainage points and that kind of thing, but it's definitely not as fine scale enough to be able to look at elevation within the paddock. If you've moved away from your map areas and you want to jump back to where you were, you can always double click on some of the features that are on the map, and it will zoom back over to where you were. There is also a measurement tool in the top toolbar. If you click that, you can then measure quite easily along 2 different points. You can change the units, and you can save that measurement if you wish. A line is the measurement between 2 single points. A path, you can add multiple points. A polygon would be very similar to drawing a polygon on a paddock. It then gives you the perimeter and the hectares. Circle, if you click once in the center of your circle and then drag your mouse out, you can then measure radius and the area and the circumference. Very handy for center pivots. There is also the options of a 3D polygon and 3D path, but we won't be going through them just yet. On the top right-hand corner, there is a tool that lets you rotate by clicking on the N and dragging it around. If you want to return to the correct or the northern view, click N for north and it will turn back to the north direction. You can also move on the map by clicking these arrows. And you can also change your viewpoint by using these arrows here. For example, if I click the down arrow and I zoom out, I'm going to be looking directly down onto my farm. If I use the up arrow, I'm going to be looking more out into the horizon. So it just depends exactly what you're trying to do as to which angle you will look at. But more often than not, I will be looking directly down to get a bird's eye view of my paddock. And also north. Over on the right hand tool, we also have drag to enter street view. So if we click on the little man, we should be able to have street view. So I've dropped that on the road, so anywhere there's a blue line is able to be viewed in street view. And you can look around by clicking and dragging. And if you'd like to travel further down the road, you can click on the arrows. And drag. Oh, you can see a G dot just in our paddock there. To exit street view, there's a button up on the right hand corner. Exit street view. The next thing to look at is how to create a file structure on the left hand side. So as you can see, there's two different locations. So there's My Places and Temporary Places. Temporary Places is, as it says, it's temporary. So if you want to keep something, it's always good to put it into My Places. So the most organized way to do this is to go Add in a folder. I'm going to call this Farm Files, which goes to the bottom. And then I'm going to click on one and hold down Shift. And then click on the other one, which selects all of them. And I'm going to click and drag them into Farm Files. That way, if I turn Farm Files off and back on, all my points are appearing and disappearing, which means it's worked. And then I can click Farm Files into My Places, which means it will be there present every time I open Google Earth. Now, the other thing that's really handy to do is to click on my Farm Files, and then right click and go Save Place As. And then from here, I'm able to save my KMZ, which is a Google Earth file. So there's either a KMZ or a KML, and I can save that wherever. That way, you can transfer it to a different computer, you can email it to somebody, or you can reopen it. And it's basically just like a backup in case something happens to your files within Google Earth. So the next feature to look at is the Show Historical Imagery button on the top toolbar panel. If we click this, it brings up a little toolbar. It's got two different shades of blue on it. So the dark blue, or wherever there's light blue, new imagery is captured. So we're currently in May 2024, but if we look down on the bottom toolbar, we can see that this imagery date is the 1st of the 8th, 2023. What we can do is click to travel back in time, and it loads new imagery for each date. So you can also click and drag. So if I click and drag back to 2016, it can sometimes take a little bit to load. So we can see how the imagery has changed in that time. What it's really helpful for is if you've got zones that might travel across your paddock, like sand ridges, or maybe you've got some sodic spots. It's really good to be able to compare that imagery over time, just to see if the area is remaining consistent, if it's growing larger, if it's growing smaller. You can often see weak spots through the cane. You can see areas of soakage. For example, in this paddock here, you can see where it's lodged versus where it's not lodged. And it allows you to go and do some ground truthing. So what we can do, if we've discovered an area within our paddock that we want to go and ground truth, so what we can do, we can put a little pin there. That pin's a bit large, so I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. I'm going to change it to that pin there. Okay. We'll say ground truth 1. So what you can see is it's actually giving us the latitude and the longitude for that pin, which we could put into a GPS and actually walk into the paddock to go and see what's going on there. And vice versa, if you're in your paddock and you notice something is a little bit funny, you can record the latitude and the longitude of that spot using your phone or a GPS, and then you can come back into Google Earth and add that point in, and you can check what's been going on over the last few years using that historical imagery tool. There's also an online version of Google Earth. So if you go to your web browser and type in Google Earth Web and click on the first option that comes up, Explore Google Earth, it will open the online version. You can zoom in and zoom out using the scroll button on your mouse, and you can also click and drag along the map window to move around. You can search Google Earth the same way that you can search Google Earth Desktop by typing in any town. It will then zoom to the city centre. You can then close the info panel on the right-hand side. But I'm going to zoom back into the Farmacist farm here. Okay, so from here we can add a place mark. You can see that the place mark follows my cursor around, so I'm going to click just here. And from here I have to just decide where I'm going to save my feature. So I can create a Google Earth project in Google Drive, or I can store it in a local KML file, which I'm going to select. From there, I'm going to give my place mark a name, which is shed. I can add a picture, which I'm not going to do, but you can upload an image file. I can add a description. So this is the Farmacist shed. I can change my icon. So clicking on the icon and then go more icons. I can then click from one of many, many, many icons. And I can also change the icon color and the icon size. If I wanted to delete my place mark, I can do that by clicking these 3 dots here and click delete. We can just click on the close button, which will then leave it there. The next tool is to add a path or a polygon. So if I click that, I'm then going to trace around my paddock. And then by clicking on the first vertex that I put in, I can then close the shape, which will then create my polygon. So what we can see here is that we've got a perimeter and an area in hectares. you can click on the little arrow and it will then change the units, and then I can click Save to Project. Once I've saved it to project, I can then give it a name. I can add a description. I can change the outline color and the width, and I can change the fill color. Once I've changed all the settings that I want to, I'm going to click the X, which then leaves that there. So once I've added my features of my farm, if I come over onto the left-hand layers panel, so remember that I was going to save it as a local KML file. So if I expand this down, I can see I've got my shed and I've got block 1. It's still got an untitled name. So I'm just going to go show more options and rename. I'm going to call this the Farmacist farm files. Okay, so I can easily turn that on and off by clicking the little eye. That will turn everything on and off at the same time. If I want to, I can add folders within this. I can rename this up here. So we've got untitled folder. So if I call this blocks, and then if I close that, I can then click on these little dots here and drag into the folder. That way I could set up all of my paddocks consecutively underneath here. And it's just a way that you can organize it. So I could add a blocks folder, a points of interest folder, irrigation infrastructure, that type of thing. So once you've added your files that you want to add to export, you click on these 3 little dots here, export as KML file, and that will then appear in your downloads. So then you can move that to wherever you need to go. But that's a very safe way to store your files, to export it to a KML, and then that way you don't have to rely on it being in your local drive on your computer. Now, Google Earth has made a new feature where you can store your KMLs in Google Drive, and then once they're stored in Drive, you can then actually view them on your phone or your iPad in the Google Earth app. So if we create a new project and we create a Google Drive project, it is then linked to my Google account. This Google webinar test. So you can still export it as a KML. You can actually share it with different people. So your farm manager, for example. I'm going to go back to the list, and I'm just going to turn this one off so that we're not getting confused. So I've clicked on this, so I know that I'm adding features to the Google webinar test folder. So I'm going to rename this to blocks. which has created a folder. And then within the folder, I'm going to add my polygons. Save that. I'm going to call this block 1. I'm then going to draw in block 2. I'm going to add a point of interest on the shed. Okay, so this is now saved to Google Drive. You can see the little tick in the cloud there so that you know that it's saved. So now I'm going to jump on over to my phone and download the Google Earth app and see if I can see it. So Google Earth has been downloaded from the App Store, and this is how it looks here in the top left. I'm going to click on that, which is going to open up Google Earth. From here, we can just slide up from the bottom, and it will give me a list of my projects. So as you can see, my Google webinar test KML that I made on the computer isn't there yet, which is fine. I just need to add it in. So to do this, I hit the plus button, and then from there, I can then click Open from Drive. From there, I'm going to pick my drive. However, if somebody else has made a file for you, you could look in shared drives or shared with me. But for now, I'm going to click on my drive. From there, I'm going to go to the Google Earth folder, and I can see my KMZ is right here, Google Webinar Test. So once I click that, it automatically loads, and you can see my 2 blocks that I added in and my place marks. So if you scroll back up, you can see all the different files that are there. So I've got my blocks and my shed. From there, I can add a place mark or a polygon, and it will be linked back to the Google Drive. To navigate on the map, you just zoom in and zoom out using the pinch motion with your fingers on the screen. And you can also rotate the view. To add a place mark, you scroll up and click Add Place Mark. From there, you can move the map around to get the right location for your place mark. What this can be really handy for is if you're in the paddock, say you're sitting in the harvester, maybe you see some rat damage, maybe you see some cane that isn't performing as well as other cane. You might see an area that's had a soakage issue. You can add this place mark, and it's going to be linked right back to your Google Earth web account, so you can then view it on the computer and you can view what's going on. So if we go add place mark, and this is my location that I've picked, and you click save to project, you can then give it a name. You can change the icon. You get the same options that you get in the web version. There's heaps of options there that you can pick from. You can then change the color. And we can also add a description. And we can also add a photo if you wish by clicking the plus media button.
So we've also got the latitude and the longitude. And if you hit the three little dots, you can delete it if you wish. So that's now saved there, and it will also be saved on the Google Earth web version for when I get back into the office. One thing to note as well is in the bottom right hand corner, there's some tools. So the little arrow, which is third down, is actually a location button. So if you click that, it's going to zoom into your location. So if you're within the paddock, you can actually click that little button and it will show you exactly whereabouts within the paddock you are, which is handy for when you're adding place marks in.
So now that I'm back on Google Earth web version, so after adding some place marks on my phone, I'm going to hit reload. And that has automatically synced up the place marks that were added on my phone. So there's no real way to do a live link between the Google Earth web version and the desktop version, which we started in. So the easiest way to do that, if you create something in web or on your phone, and you actually do want to have it in the Google Earth desktop version, the easiest way to do that is to click on those three little dots and export it as a KML file, which will then be able to be opened in the desktop version. If you have some other external files that you wish to add into the Google Earth web, and then open or import. So open if it's from a drive folder, or import if it's just a local file that's on your computer. That's the end of part 1 of the Google Earth webinar. So there will be a part 2, which will go through in detail how to view the Farmacist files that are present on your P2D USB stick. But this first webinar was basically just to understand the 3 different versions of Google Earth and how you can actually use them. So stay tuned for part 2, and we will see you then.